Hey everybody, David here, and welcome to the ASOG podcast. In this episode, we are joined by Stéphane Grabina, the president and owner of Excluservice, a European specialty shop in Rockville, Maryland. We decided to tackle the ever-constant problem of estimating, pre-authorizing diagnostic testing fees, and properly selling value instead of simply quoting prices. I think the topic was broader than what we expected, but I think you'll find several key nuggets that will hopefully change the way you view estimating and pricing your own services. If you haven't already, make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast on your favorite podcast listening app. We are on every single one. If you're catching us on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit a specific goal in subscribers, so help us out. Subscribe to the channel if you're listening. It would be greatly appreciated. And with all that out of the way, here we go.
We've often run into, we don't remember what it was like to be a client walking into a new place. Everybody thinks everybody knows everything, and they don't.
Exactly. The curse of knowledge, right? And that's my big thing is that if you look on my website, I've got a video where we did how to do a after hours drop off, right? And people are like, why would you need to do that? Well, because they need to understand the process. And it really came from an experience that I had where I went somewhere and, went into this hotel and basically nobody was at the front counter. And that awkward feeling you get and you're standing there and you're like, what am I supposed to do? And she comes out and she gives me my key and she's like, here you go. Okay. So where's my room? What's the room number? Where's the elevators? Like, where do I go? And I think that as business owners, it's really easy. And I talk a lot about customer service. And I think that it's easy for us as business owners to lose sight that customer service is about the customer. And this is just an example of that. But when we're talking about estimates and we're talking about a work authorization, we're talking about something that quickly becomes an ethical and moral issue, right? For instance, in my shop, my policy is if we didn't give you an estimate or our estimate is different than what we told you, I'm going to make that right? That comes out of my pocket, not my customer's pocket. So I take it very seriously. I know some don't.
No, I mean, that's exactly it. In the state of Maryland, you're allowed a variance of 10% from your estimate. But at the end of the day, if you're a couple pennies over what you quoted, and it doesn't match what you told the customer on the phone, that might leave a bad feeling for that client. And they may not come back. They may not say anything, but they may not come back. Is that worth the risk? Right. So.
Well, and for instance, like in our shop, right. And we will occasionally mistakes happen, right? Everybody has mistakes, but occasionally somebody will start on a job. Maybe they started on the wrong job. Maybe they went out and pulled a vehicle in to do a testing routine on it and they misunderstood where they were supposed to be going next. We will stop the job, right? Or we will not charge for the testing until we speak to that customer. We'll say, hey, do you want us to proceed with this? Right. And I think it's the understanding and taking that extremely serious when we get into a situation that, hey, we're spending someone else's money, right? That's huge for me. I'm not going to spend somebody else's money without their permission. I wouldn't reach into their wallet and take $1 bill out. Well, it's just $1. No, that's not what it's about. It's about trust and communication with your client. And I think that's really important.
That's a good way to put it at it. I think I'm going to tell my new service advisor that's a perfect way to put it. It's not your money. You're not going to reach into the wallet, pull it out and spend it. So you have to look at it the same way. So how do you deal with that at your shop, Stéphane? How do you make sure that they walk in with the correct expectation without pricing on the phone, without maybe scaring them off with testing fees on the phone, but at the same time, you need to be upfront. You need to be honest with them. You need to make sure they understand that, hey, we don't just quote unquote look at it for free. That's not a thing, right? The technician's going to go out, and if they touch your car, there has to be some charge to it. So how do you handle those situations?
Well, I mean, we quote over the phone if they come in and they say, or if they call me and they say, hey, my surface engine soon light is on, or my coolant level light is on, and I got coolant all over the ground. What's it going to cost? What's going to be? I'm like, well, it's going to run about $150 for us to take a look at it. Once we have some ideas to what's going on, whether we need more testing, we'll let you know, or we'll let you know what the repair will be. And that's pretty much the standard conversation, right? So if someone is scared away about that, I'd rather they be scared away on the phone than show up at the door and waste everybody's time. It's just a way I feel of filtering people. It's not, I know I'm going to trigger some folks, but not every customer is my customer, and that's okay. Lucas, you guys carry a pretty decent average repair order. I know you do. And does that mean that you're not going to welcome anybody? No, of course you'll welcome anybody. However, I think you'll have that conversation with them so that they aren't going to want to, or when they walk into your door, they know what to expect. And if they don't ask the question, I'm not going to put it out there, right? So there's a little bit of a difference there, right? So if they ask me, I'm not going to lie to them, and I won't sugarcoat it. I'll tell them what it is. But if they don't ask and they just say, hey, I'd like to bring my car in for a check engine light, and I say, okay, come on in. Now, does that mean that it is possible that when they show up that we have that uncomfortable conversation? Maybe, but you got to have the conversation before you touch the car. There's no point in diagnosing something if they're not going to authorize it, right? And it's also, for me, it's a filter. So if they're not going to authorize the diag time, then they're sure as heck not going to authorize the repair. So why are we wasting our time?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I work a little bit differently here. And the reason being is we're in a college town, and we deal with a lot of college students. So I make it explicitly clear, right? When I'm on the phone with Mrs. Customer, it sounds like we need to do a level 1 testing routine, and I'm able to determine the cause or causes of your concern in about 90% of all cases with a level 1 testing routine. I would ask that you approve us up to $135 for the level 1 testing routine. The other 10% of the time, we may have to do specific tests. Think of it like a doctor's office. You go to the doctor's office and he might be able to tell that, hey, you've got a cold, and tell you to go home and rest. Or if you've got an arm problem, your arm's hurting and it's got an abrasion on it, he might have to say he needs to do an x-ray. We work very much the same way. So we would price that by the test. Does that make sense to you? Sure thing. And so I found it's really important for me to set that expectation ahead of time, because I have had some customers who come in and thought, well, I didn't know you charged for this. We've got shops all around us who don't charge for diag. And let's be transparent, they're not really doing diag. So, I've got a car in the shop right now who, it was at another shop in town, and they actually damaged the car worse than what it was. And the dad said, I would have rather paid you the $150 to tell me it needed a transmission and then it needed all this other work, instead of waiting 4 weeks for this other shop just to tell me they didn't know what was wrong with it. Right. And I think that charge is more of a problem for the person behind the counter in many, many cases than it is for the customer on the other end of the telephone. Right. I don't think that number is too big of a deal. It's what we make it.
I agree. And it's the difference for how our end result is the same. The presentation's different. And it also, I might go into a similar explanation to that depending on the person who's on the phone, right? So we have to gauge the caller and see what would be their trigger, or what's important to them, or how can we explain it to them so it makes sense to them, right? So so the presentation makes a big difference.
Absolutely. I really agree. But I think at the end of the day, what this comes back to for me is I think we have an ethical obligation to our client, and more so to our industry, to our peers, to do this the right way. Right. And look, in North Carolina, the limit's $350. Above $350, you have to have a written estimate, and the customer has to see the written estimate, and they have to approve the written estimate before you can continue. And then you have a 10% variance from that. The number of shops that I talk to who A, don't write estimates, who B, they might do a written estimate, but it doesn't have the information they need on it, or it doesn't have a price on it, or maybe they do an estimate and they never send it to the customer. They don't realize that it's actually, I think in some cases, it's even a misdemeanor in North Carolina. And they don't even realize that they're in the wrong. Recently I had a situation where a good friend of mine took his vehicle somewhere and he came back and the bill was $3,500. And he said, all I asked you to do was tell me what's wrong with it. They said, well, we fixed all this. It was a custom car. It was really nice. And I said, look, you need to get an attorney and have the attorney handle it. I said, because at the end of the day, you owe him $350. And he told the shop I said that, and they called. They were really upset, and they said, why would you tell him that? And I said, because that's what the law says. We have an obligation to do the right thing for our clients, but we also have an obligation for our industry as a whole to make sure we're doing this properly, make sure we're doing this ethically.
Absolutely. And in your state, the written part, can it be digital? Like, for example, we send text messages where the customer approves and declines the repair because I use TechMetric. So in your state, is that a requirement, or would that pass the muster? I mean, I think the spirit of the law is what we're after here, I guess, but
yes, it would. It shows, for instance, in Shopware, it shows that they viewed the estimate, and in our case, we won't start until they approve it. Right. So they have to approve it. And then when we create estimates that need to be done, they have to approve it. They can call via telephone. And of course, we record our calls. They can come in and we document that they were here. We make a little note about the approval and explain what happened and what the conversation was like. And I talk to shops and they say, gosh, but that takes so much time. That information is gold.
Absolutely.
Not just when it comes to if I have to go to court because there was a misunderstanding. No, this helps explain how the customer thinks. This helps us understand how to better serve the customer. It makes us a better salesperson, right? Across the board, I think the information's gold. And so I just think that shops look at this and they say, oh, it's hard, it's this, it's that. It's fear, right? I think shop owners especially are afraid to tell a customer price up front because they're afraid they'll say no. And I'm afraid to not tell a customer a price up front. That terrifies me.
No, I agree. I had a customer, I'm sure it happens to you. You have customers that are key droppers. They say, oh, just call me when it's done. And I'm like, I'll call you when I have an estimate. Like, I don't care how long I've known you. I don't know what your threshold for expensive is versus my threshold for expensive. Because nowadays I'm looking at a car. I was just talking to my service manager at the shop yesterday. And I said, it's amazing how when we're selling a job and it's $800 and, we quoted maybe $3,500 worth of work on the car and they only bought $800. We're like, they only bought $800. That's a low number. That's just what we've become accustomed to at this point. So I think it also depends what you're working on will dictate what is a high number. But at the bottom line is, I kind of steered off there. My vision of what a high bill is versus what a customer's vision of a high bill is could be totally different. I don't know what that is. I don't know if he lost their job. I know, they're driving a BMW. There's, you would think they'd have money, but maybe they're financing the car. I don't know. And I'm not going to guess as to what their budget is. So got to have that conversation with them.
Right. Well, and so, when I make an estimate, right. And now that I'm back to being service advisor extraordinaire again. Basically, when I make an estimate, I'm going to prioritize everything that vehicle needs. We follow the 300% rule. And basically, and I think we all know what the 300% rule is, but maybe we should cover it.
We should rehash it.
Yeah, absolutely. We evaluate 100% of all vehicles. We do a DVI on every single vehicle. We expect the DVI to take between 30 to 40, 45 minutes. We do a complete write-up on every single issue that was located on the car. So if it has anything but a green check beside it, we're going to create an estimate for that item, and we are going to present every single bit of that. So we estimate 100, or we evaluate 100% of the cars, estimate 100% of the concerns located on the car, and we present 100% of those estimates. right? And then when we come back to the customer, I'll sit down, I'll say, hey, listen, I've prioritized this. I have some things on here that are more important than others. You'll be able to look at my estimates and tell the things at the top, they're the highest priority. They were your concerns. And then as you move your way down, we get down to where some things are maintenance concerns. They need to be addressed to prevent further problems down the road. And down here at the bottom, you have some things that are cosmetic or don't need to be done right now. But, I think it's our obligation. One of the things that I heard somebody say years ago, we were talking about it, and he said, if you went to a doctor's office and you had a cold and he didn't tell you that he saw a lump on your neck that was cancer, how would you feel about that? So I'd be pretty upset. Man, I'd be pissed. He's like, exactly. That's why it's so important we inform our customers. We're the professionals. It's our job.
Absolutely. And I've heard that before, and I think the place I heard it at was this is back when I was with ATI many years ago, and I think it was George Zeeks that mentioned it, and that same thing. It's like, exactly. You go to the doctor, they see something on your forehead or your throat or whatever. I hope they say something about it, because if they think it looks something that could be dangerous, you should know about it.
Absolutely. And so I think that we have this fear of doing that. And I don't know why that is. I mean, I've watched shop owner after shop owner after shop owner do it. And, I've got a lot of shops here in North Carolina that I kind of work with and mentor, and they're friends of mine. And just like David did for me and Dutch did for me, I go in and try and say, hey, if you need something, if you need some advice or I can help you, please don't hesitate, reach out, And in doing that, I've seen shop after shop after shop. I think it's almost like just a common thing at this point that we're not following this process, that we're not educating our customers, we're not providing this information to them. They bring the car in and somebody comes in and says, hey, I have this problem. I've got a flat tire, and we go out to the car and we change the flat tire. We never tell them how much it'll be. We don't ever say anything about it. We put the tire back on and they go down the road. Well, there's some liability involved with that. And I talk to a lot of shop owners and they say, why am I liable? They just asked me to fix the tire. Right. But you put your good housekeeping seal of approval on that vehicle. It was an unspoken expectation. Rick's always told me this is an unspoken expectation. They expect their car to be safe and reliable. That's why you have these comebacks where they come back and say, I know you just changed my oil, but now my car doesn't start. Right.
Yeah. And everybody makes those posts about the ever since, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so much of this is solved with a conversation, right? So much of this is solved with educating your customer. I don't know if either one of you saw it a few years back, and I'll see if I can find the link. We'll put it in the podcast. But a few years back, there was an older lady, and I want to say it may have been in New Hampshire or Connecticut, and she pulled into a service station because she had a tire that had blown out. And she said, I would like my tire fixed. Well, they fixed the tire, and she went down the road, and everything was great. Not long after that, I want to say maybe a week, maybe a month, it wasn't too long, a brake line blew out on the car, and she was killed in a car accident, and her family sued the repair facility and won. And when they were sued, the judge looked at the owner of the facility and said, you're a professional. It is your responsibility to ensure that she understands her car is not safe. And they said, well, we were just putting a tire on it. He said, it doesn't matter. You're the professional. Turns out a brake line had blown. I think if nothing else, if at least we're putting on the estimate, and I know we're going down a rabbit hole here, but at least if we're putting on the estimate that, hey, listen, there is a concern that you may need to know about, or we've checked the car and we see this, and this, at least when we go to court, that judge is going to look at that and say, hey, you did your very best. You alerted them to other concerns. They didn't want to fix any of that. Yeah, you may not have mentioned the brake line, but gosh, that was awful hard to see. Maybe you couldn't have seen that. But I mean, even something stupid and simple like a tire change, we don't just send those through the shop. We're going to do a vehicle evaluation on that.
No, I agree 100%. I preach to my advisor, and he's done a really good job with it, is what we're writing, these repair orders. And I actually learned this when I was a service writer. I was at a Jeep dealership, and the owner of that Jeep dealership was a great guy and a great mentor. And he said, everything we write on these repair orders is a legal document. You have to be able to defend what you put on this repair order as if it went to court. It's a legal document and it can be used against you. So whatever you see, just document it, write it. And so my service supervisor, he's done a great job of documenting the heck out of everything. And, if there's a question, if the technician wasn't very clear, he'll go and get clarification. And then, either the technician will update the ticket or he'll update the ticket. But at the end of the day, it has to pass muster. We have to be able to document everything that we see, good or bad. Are you going to catch everything? No, you're not, right? You're going to miss, maybe they did look at it and they missed the brake line. Who knows? We don't know that. But you have to at least present things. And it's also a CYA, right? So if you told a customer, like we had the perfect situation. Last week, we had a customer came in for an oil change, and the tech, we parked the car out back. When the tech went to go start the car to start the oil change, put the key in, hit the start button, click, 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 car wouldn't start. Starter was dead. And then we're like, oh crap, now we're going to buy a starter, right? Because the car drove in. Well, we look back in our service history, and in July, we recommended the starter, because he came in for an intermittent complaint of the car not starting. And we told him that the starter was weak at that time. So we were able to fall back on, our July repair order. And guess what? He bought the starter, and it was documented, and he understood the communication was there. So the expectation, did he come in expecting to buy a starter? No, but he understood. He knew that the starter was any day now was going to fail, and it just happened to fail right there. And so, we sold him a starter, customer's happy, and drove it back to his house, and car's done.
Cover your assets, right?
Yeah. CYA, right? Did I say the wrong one?
and write it out like it's going to be read in court.
Right. Exactly. If it's not on paper, it's a lie.
Well, yeah, but once you are putting it on paper, write it out as though it's going to be read out loud in court. And so if you are detailed enough and it tells the correct story, what actually happened, in your mind, you'll be covered. I think for a lot of shop owners, the disconnect, the problem is that if you are doing the selling, and this isn't true for, like, I've had to get over this, and I'm sure you fought it for a while too, Lucas, is it's easy for you to just go outside and look at something and see under the hood that you maybe see a spark plug wire that's jumping, and that's causing the misfire, obviously, right? And maybe you don't go through and double check to make sure that there's any additional engine damage or whatever. That whole process for you is quick and easy and simple, and in your mind doesn't carry any value. And so that gets translated over to the customer. You don't think it has any value because it was very simple for you to do. That then gets communicated either explicitly or implicitly to the customer that there's no value behind what you just went out and did. Your years of experience, your years of knowledge, all the different vehicles that you've had to run into that you've maybe gotten burned on, with it just being a simple spark plug wire jumping and you didn't catch it the first time, and so you're chasing this misfire for hours, and it turns out to just be a spark plug wire. Now you know to check it, and so all that gets discounted in your mind, and you don't have a formalized process when the customer comes in to tell them that, hey, we need to do our due diligence. We need to make sure we do a full inspection on the vehicle or assessment. We need to make sure that we are checking which cylinder is misfiring. We're running codes. We're checking and make sure there is no internal engine damage, that there's no other components that could be causing or that was maybe damaged due to the faulty spark plug wire. And therefore is going to cost X amount of dollars. All that gets discounted in the shop owner's mind, and it is a fight, a struggle to get that mindset to shift.
Amen. And here's the thing, right? And I think this is where we all go wrong, right? This is where we all miss it, and it's such a problem, is that when we get into this situation, right, we go out there and we look at this car and we say, okay, yeah, I can fix that really quick. But then that customer has that expectation that if something goes wrong, we're responsible for it, right? And I think that's where I began to make this really big shift when this popped up for me, is that I realized there was a pain associated with that. Even though I was right, right? I've gone out and I've looked at this car. I know this is what it was. I recommend the repair, but now something else is going on with the car. So that I used that pain point to shift in my business, and I turned into this situation where now we look at every single car. Right. And when I'm talking to my customers and they say, well, oh my gosh, you're going to charge me to tell me what's wrong with it. I can go to AutoZone and do that. Or the guy down the street doesn't charge. And I'm just really politely going to say, hey, I completely understand, Mrs. Customer, but when we charge you to determine what the cause is, it's our responsibility if we're wrong. And a lot of these places that you go to, if they're not charging you, they'll change parts all day. They may not have charged you to test it, but they're going to charge you to change the parts, and it may not fix the concern. Have you ever been to a facility who changed a part and it didn't correct the problem? Oh, yeah. That's why I'm so hesitant. Right. Well, that's why I'm going to charge you, because then it's my responsibility that if we're wrong, we're going to make this right. Okay. Right. And I think that it's about that pain point that's created that in me, because there is not one soul that's going to walk through the door. And, I'm a good old country boy. Right. I built this business.
Yeah, but you're smooth, man.
Well, I built this business with folks from a small country town. Right. And they would come in and we were all buddies. And I started to realize I had all these friends that were only around when they needed something. Right. And so I got to paying attention to these folks, and they had a lot of expectations for me. And I realized I was spending a lot of time helping them. And don't get me wrong, I still want to help them. But now I realize that if I want to help them properly, that means I have to charge them. Right. I have to set up a time so I can properly look at the vehicle. And that time in that bay, very simply, it's my labor inventory. Right? I have to look at that bay, and in that bay, I've got this many hours of a day, and I have to book time into it, just like the doctor does, just like the dentist does, just like everybody else. I'm selling my time. I'm selling a portion of that bay's time. I have to charge appropriately if you want to come into this bay and have us look at your vehicle. And in exchange for that, I am going to provide you a quality service that when I tell you that's what it is, I'm responsible for it, not you. Right. And so I think that it's just setting my mind down and saying, hey, listen, mind, this is how we're going to do it from now on. Nobody's walking through that door and you're running out and hooking up a scan tool and reading the codes and going for a drive and doing all these other things. Yeah, we'll run out and check the codes for free. Yep, that looks like something we're going to need to get in and do some testing. Or, hey, that's not a concern. We saw that last time. It's the same thing popping up and you didn't want to fix it then. If you want to go ahead and get it fixed, we can get you in, but it's the same code. Right. But it's
how'd that shift in your mind?
What do you mean?
You didn't start out that way. I know. I
think what he's asking is what was the point that made
Catalyst.
You change? Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's the right word.
Well, I hired Rick, and I would do these things over and over again, and he caught on to that. He was looking at the ARO. Now, we had a really high ARO, but he also was noticing that I was I'd go out and look at a job and say, oh, yeah, it's just this. And I'd send it down the road. And he said, you don't realize how much liability is involved with that. There's a ton of liability. So that was kind of the first thing. I'd never thought of it in that light. But the more I paid attention to it, I realized that it prevented me from setting proper expectations with my customer. Right? It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the dollars. It was about controlling the circumstance of the engagement with the customer. I need to have the vehicle dropped off. It's going to take me 4 to 6 hours to look at the vehicle. I can't do that with them just pulling in the parking lot and asking me to take a look at it. This became part of the process that allows me to serve my customer at a high level. It's not just about the money. It's about serving my customer at a high level.
Do you take waiters, Stéphane?
Currently, with COVID, we have actually closed our waiting room, so the answer is no. And we're in Maryland, so let's just say we're very sensitive to COVID, right? Some people think it's a hoax, and I'm not going to get into that debate. But in Maryland, it's a very sensitive subject, so we're very cautious and very careful.
So we pre-COVID, let's say.
Pre-COVID, I didn't like them.
Nobody likes them. But
I can't convert a waiting customer into a good customer. Maybe that's my inability to sell. I don't know. I can't complete a thorough inspection because they're rushing us. it takes 2 hours to look at a car and write an estimate. And someone who just wants an oil and filter change and they want to wait for it, they're not going to want to wait that long. And I agree the perspective of, there is a coaching company that says, find the one thing. That's hard for me because we work on BMWs for crying out loud. Do you know how hard it is to find just one thing? I mean, we get writers crank.
And you got to pick, you got to pick which one thing are we going to show them?
Right, exactly. And it may work for some, and I'm not going to poo-poo it, right? I mean, it's to each their own. It just I could not get it to work. I really wanted to, and I was sold on the idea, and I was sold on, well, if they're not going to buy the one thing, they're not going to buy anything else, so why would I waste my time with a full inspection? But like you said, we're the professionals. They're coming to us for an oil change, an oil and filter change, and they think that's all they want to get, but what if the wheel bearing's about to fall off? What if the control arm bushings are so shot that it's going to destroy the control arm when we could just do the bushing now? What if the oil filter housing gasket's leaking onto the belt and it's going to cause the belt to come off and it's going to get stuck behind the crank pulley and just wipe out the main seal, the front main seal? Now you got belt shrapnel in the engine. So we could have done a $700 oil filter housing gasket. Now they got to do $5,000 worth of work because by the way, it's also an all-wheel drive car. So the axle goes through the oil pan. So it's
amen. And
this is what we do. This is our profession. It's just like you said, the whole doctor's office thing. It's to me, it's that argument. And if someone is waiting, I agree. They're not going to sit there after 2 hours for us to tell them they need $4,000 worth of work. I agree 100%, which is why the waiters just don't work for me. I can't get them to convert. I can try to do an oil change and knock it out, but it's still going to be there at least 2 hours.
Right. And look, that's exactly what I tell my customers when they come in. Hey, listen, you're more than welcome to wait on it. But typically an oil change, even a state inspection, you're looking at a minimum of an hour, usually 2 to 2.5 hours. And they're like, what? I'm like, listen, we're very thorough and your safety and the reliability of your vehicle is very important to us. And I can't do the job that I know I need to do with your vehicle in an hour. I know I can't do it in 30 minutes. And they're like, well,
so we have a shop that's local here. They sell cheap oil changes. That they drive a lot of car count into their bays with cheap oil changes. That's their shtick. They do the just one thing, sort of. They're looking for low-hanging fruit. So they get the vehicle in. These vehicles are typically clapped out, and the oil change, I think, is $15, or it was $15 at one point, just here recently. And they're looking for brakes, steering, suspension, maybe a gasket, something obvious. They're not doing a thorough inspection. Safety isn't their concern. It's what can I sell quickly right now? Because I may never see this vehicle again. And we have, I think, 6 of them here in Kansas City that all do very well. They're always busy because every week in the supermarket flyer is this guy's mug with the $15 oil change, and he's got other coupons on there, but it's mostly that's what drives the car count is the $15 oil changes. And so these vehicles show up and that's their shtick. That's what they do. They look at the vehicle and say, hey, you need brakes and you've got this gasket leaking. Let's fix that. Let's ignore the radiator that's about to burst. Let's look, because those things aren't obvious, and they're not doing a full inspection. They're doing a quick inspection. They need to find something to justify that $15 oil change and flip the bay as quickly as possible. So they definitely don't want to get into anything too deep. What can we do as quickly as possible on this vehicle to be able to flip it at maximum profitability? And so a lot of customers, a lot of people go there. They get soured on the experience, and then they show up here and they almost expect the same thing. So what do you mean I can't get my oil change done in 30 minutes? So no, it's 90 minutes to 2 hours because we're doing a full inspection. Yeah, and they think it's, and that's sort of the problem, and that's the point I'm bringing up is how do you guys deal with that? And maybe not for you, Stéphane, because you're dealing with higher end cars, but you still have the BMW that thinks going down to Valvoline and their oil change at the Valvoline place is the same thing as your oil change. There's no difference in their mind. And that's sort of what we're fighting here with these discount places. And the national chains all do it too. We have a Tires Plus, we've got Firestone, we got NTB, or their Big O Tire now. They're surrounding me, and they do the same thing. They're all looking for quick items that will turn the bay at maximum profitability, and they're not interested necessarily in ensuring that vehicle is maximally reliable and maximally safe. That's not their concern. Their concern is, what can I find right now to be able to turn this $20 oil change, $25 oil change into a $1,000 ticket that then I can turn the bay quickly, because they'll be able to knock out the suspension work easily. How do you deal with that when these customers are coming in and you're having to set expectations? What kind of approaches do you guys take?
Well, I think Lucas hit it on the head earlier with his presentation of why it takes that long to do an oil service. It's you just have to have that conversation, and some people are going to get it, some people aren't, and you have to be willing to accept the fact that some people are not going to want that. Whether they need it or not is irrelevant. They're just not going to want it. So you're not going to get them as a client.
Exactly. And here's the thing is I'll just set them down and I'll talk to them about it. And I'll say, Mrs. Customer, I hear you telling me that the experiences you've had everywhere else weren't a great experience. I would love to have the opportunity to show you something different, because we do things differently here. We really care about you. We believe you're part of our family. And in doing so, we have to make sure that your vehicle is safe and reliable. And it's a modern automobile. It's not something that I can do in 30 minutes. In all honesty, it is going to take me 2 hours to 3 hours to properly review your vehicle and ensure that I can say your vehicle is safe for you and your family. Now, Mrs. Customer, I completely understand if we're not a good fit for you. I know some really great shops in town, but if this is something that you're interested in pursuing,
well, hold on. You just talked out of both sides of your mouth here. Are they really great shops in town that can do it, get you in and out in 15 minutes? They'll have a running oil change. They don't even. Yeah, I understand, but why call them great shops? They're like, hey, they're not even going to turn the engine off. They're just going to drain the oil from the bottom and fill it from the top while the car's running. You don't even have to turn it off.
No matter what the quality of the shop we're sending people to, we never poo-poo that shop, right? You got to remain, because if you do, then you look like the bad guy and you look like the one that's unprofessional, because you're calling other people out, right? So, but if you're staying professional, hey, look, they run a great business. They do things their way. We do things our way. Which Mr. Customer, Miss Customer, which one's most important to you? Is the safety of your family more important to you, or do you just want a quick number in and out? It's obviously, I'm being a little brash, but that's the gist of what we're telling them.
I agree with you, which was my point. I think the more thorough way is far superior. I think it's disingenuous to the customer. I think you're being deceitful almost, and saying that, hey, if you just come in, I can do your oil change in 15 minutes. And I went to go visit a shop in South Carolina, and I'm driving by. I think they're called 15-minute oil change. I think that's the name of the shop.
They are.
Somebody will have to. Yeah. Okay. There you go. So how are you doing any oil change on any modern vehicle in 15 minutes? Just looking up the maintenance minder reset procedures,
right,
is going to take you a few minutes. Like, you got to be kidding me.
And see, that's my point, right? So that's what I'm trying to say is that by explaining it the way that I explain it, I'm already telling them that. I don't have to talk bad about the other shop.
I'm not saying to talk bad about the other shop, by the way. I'm just saying I don't know that I would call them a great shop or they run a great business or anything like that. I couldn't say that. No, so I'd be like, there are other shops in the area that can accommodate you.
Right. But I guess my point is this, is that there are shops in town that I work with that they don't do any evaluation on the vehicle. They'll pull it right in, they'll do an oil change, and they'll get it right out. That's what they do. And they're great shops. I know them. They're not interested in changing their business model. They're not interested in doing it differently. They're not going to do an inferior job or use an inferior product on the car, but they're also not going to do the evaluation. they're also not going to jump in here and say, hey, listen, we see a serious concern. There's a safety concern. There's a reliability concern. They're going to do exactly what you ask them to do. They're going to pull the car back out and they're going to put you back on the road. And if that's what the customer's looking for, I can't say to the customer, no, you're looking for the wrong thing. I don't want you to do that. I want you to do this. No, I have to guide them. I have to show them what's right. I have to give them the information they need to make an informed decision and understand that the way that we've been doing auto repair is not the right way, right? And I said it, right? What we have been doing has not been the right way. Now, there's a lot of shops who are doing it the right way. I'm not saying that everybody's doing it wrong. That's not my point. But the way that the consumer is led to believe that auto repair works is the wrong way. And so it's my job to change and help educate my customers, change their perspective, get them on a new leaf of auto repair life, right? And show them
we're on equal footing, though. That's the frustration. They see us that they think we're on equal footing. They think that shop down the street that isn't doing the evaluation, that isn't capable of doing most repairs, is the same thing as what you're offering. And they don't send their guys to training. They don't have factory equipment or information.
Hold up. Listen to me. No, listen to me. Right. I'm going to tell you something my wife said a while back. And, we were eating dinner and I told her about this one customer that I knew had gone somewhere else and they were getting their vehicle worked on. And she said, you're in the middle of the fire, so you may not see this. But she said, every customer we've ever had go somewhere else, she said, you realize they come back, right? And I said, what do you mean? She said, every customer that's ever left us to go somewhere else, unless they moved away or died, has come back at some point, and they are now back part of our family. She said it's because they realized the grass wasn't always greener on the other side. Now, there's some customers. Let me be clear. There are some customers.
Personality.
So if anybody,
right?
Yeah.
It's not a good fit.
If there are shops in town listening to this and they say, oh, no, I've got some of Lucas's customers. They're not here for a reason. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, I don't know. I think I also think there's different strokes for different folks, right? Everybody's going to have their own different style, and whether mine is the right way or not, I had a customer, a very good customer of mine. He moved to Lake Norman in North Carolina, I believe.
Yeah.
And he told me, Stéphane, I like you. I don't always like what you have to tell me, but I know you're going to tell me the truth. So some people just want to hear what they want to hear. They don't want to be told what's the truth, and they'll be upset with you and think you're the one that caused this headache in their life, right? Yeah. So, and that maybe I'm just not a really good presenter, but I kind of just, hey, your oil filter housing gasket's leaking. If you don't fix it, just Google, BMW oil filter housing gasket, and you'll see that Google will actually finish the sentence for you. And then they'll show you pictures of what happens if you don't fix it. So I'm not making this up, right? So I show it. There's the pictures. We showed you the oil leak. If you want to do it, great. If you don't want to do it, hey, my car runs fine.
Right. And I think it's really interesting to hear you put it that way, right? And be that blunt and put it out there. Hey, look, I'm not BSing you. It doesn't matter to me if you want to fix your car or not. Here it is. One thing I'll say to that, and it's something that took me a little bit of time to figure out. And when I started working with Rick, and he was teaching me the sales process, right? Because I was a technician and then I became a service advisor and I'm slowly becoming a business owner. And yeah, I bought the business way before I became a business owner. I'm still not a business owner. Let's be clear about that. But the reality is that, as we get into this conversation with the customer and we present something to them, I used to get really upset when I would say, hey, Mr. Customer, the estimate that I have for you today is $9,000. And they'd say, oh my God, or what? And I'd get upset, right? And I could feel my blood boil, and I could tell that, now I'm going to have to explain this, and they don't think they can trust me and all this stuff. And Rick always told me, just shut up. What do you mean, just shut up? He's like, that doesn't have anything to do with you. They just found out they're spending a whole lot more money than they have or want to spend. It doesn't have anything to do with you. Slow down. And I think that in the same way as what you're saying right now, Stéphane, is don't become emotionally attached to the process. Don't become emotionally attached that, hey, listen, you don't have to believe me and trust me. Here you go. Here's the information. You can look right here. You can see it yourself, but you don't have to believe me. It's okay. Cool. Right. And be okay with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a big mental shift, though. Being able to not care, walk away from the sale, compartmentalize.
Well, that's where you have to, in your own mind, you have to think to yourself, well, my car runs fine. I'm going home today. So right. It's in your own mind. That's how you separate yourself from the situation. Is you just have to, obviously be polite, be friendly, and smile. And they say smile while you're on the phone because it makes a big difference. People can actually feel the tone of your voice changes. And Absolutely. People like to deal with people that are happy. So that's a whole nother sales pitch thing, or sales training thing. But it's you're right. It's one, it's how you present it, but two, you're right. Don't get upset. Sucks. It stinks that you're having to give someone bad news, but it's not as if you're a doctor having to tell someone that that their loved one is about to die. You know what I mean? This is just a piece of metal.
It's really funny that you say that, because I was sitting here thinking about it, and I will see if I can find the link and I'll share it with both of you. There is a video, and it's about Mount Sinai Hospital, and it's about the palliative care team, and it's talking about caring for people and alerting to people about the end of their life. And I know it sounds dark and I know it sounds grim, but that really lightened my mood when it came to the sales process, because it made me realize how small this decision really is, right? What we're talking to them about right now may be uncomfortable to them right here in this minute, but it's just a car. In the grand scheme of things, this is tiny. I can say to my customer, I completely understand that's a lot of money. If you think you need to trade it or sell it or whatever you think's best, I support you, whatever you make, whatever decision you make. We're not talking about explaining to someone that they've got hours to live or days to live or months to live. And I think that when I watched that video, it was an epiphany for me, that I realized that I had put so much emphasis on how big of a deal it was fixing these cars and selling this service. But in reality, it was tiny, right? It was nothing at all. It was a tiny, just little fleck on the existence of them, right? And I think it's so important that we recognize that.
Absolutely. And, it's funny that we go down this path. I'm going to share something that one of my best friends from childhood passed away yesterday. We found out in mid-September that, I don't know if you saw my Facebook post, but we found out in mid-September that he was, he had stage 4 cancer, and they expected about 12 weeks to live. It was getting progressively worse. Last Sunday, not this past one, but the one before, I went out to visit him with a bunch of friends. And he was walking around, but he couldn't talk, right? His brain had already lost some motor functions. And then I get a call on Wednesday night of last week that, which I'm kind of glad we didn't have our appointment last week. But that's when they told me he slipped into a coma. He's not doing so well. So the next day, Thursday, I went to see him, and there he was laying in his deathbed. And it was very emotional for me because I'd known this guy since we were kids. And right. But it just goes back to, this is, even when you get a bad review, man, who cares? Who cares? Who freaking cares?
Small apples.
Right. Let's just take care of let's provide value, right? Let's help people in their lives, right? Let's do what we can to make this world a better place. I had a really good friend of mine who's my dad's attorney, and I was upset about something, and he says, in the big picture, every day you wake up, think to yourself, how can I make the world better today? And just think about that. And that will pull all these little things, into perspective, right? So let's focus on what's really important. But at the same time, obviously, to make our lives better when we're talking about running a shop, let's make sure that we're estimating things to the customer. Let's make sure that the customer can see the value in the service that we provide and explain the process. So for us, you mentioned or you asked me earlier if how we handle waiters. Well, right now our waiting room is closed. So we're telling folks, and here's what we're doing. Once you drop off the vehicle, we do ozone the car, right? We have an ozone machine. We put it in the car for about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll wait the car ventilate for another 15 to 20 minutes. And then we don't want technicians jumping from one car to the other. So as soon as a technician is done, and it could be right away, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours. Once they're available, then they'll work on your car. Once they're done, even the oil change, I tell them that takes about 2 hours. Okay, so, and then once they're done, then if no other work is done, then we're going to have to ozone the vehicle again. And that's, so that we're talking a minimum of 4 hours, and you have to drop off the car or we'll go pick it up for an oil and filter change. And some customers, they're like, wow, you go through all that? Man, I actually had someone she said, I feel for you guys. I can't believe you have to go through all that to do it. I'm like, well, we don't have to. We just do it because we want to keep everybody safe. And so many folks are like, I really appreciate that. I can drop off the car tomorrow, or they'll say, oh, yeah, no, that's not important to me. So, and I'm like, I guess we're not a fit. It is what it is.
Right. Well, look, I think that one of the things that so many shop owners struggle with is they feel like it's the customer's fault, or the customer is doing something, right? And I've said it in the podcast before. I sat in a training class with Malin Newton speaking, and the whole time he was speaking, I was realizing, oh man, I owe some people some apologies. And it was this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I could feel my chest tightening up because I was realizing more and more that all of these issues I was experiencing in the shop didn't have anything to do with my customers. It was all me. It was how I was handling things. It's how I was explaining things. It's how I was not explaining things. It was my actions and the thought process and the policies and procedures within the shop were broken. They didn't work, right? And the easiest person I could find to blame was the customer. So when I started improving things, those things got better and better, and I changed my thought process. My thought process became, how can I do what's best for my customer? How can I do what's best for my employees? That is the focus of everything we do. So when we talk about estimating, when we talk about creating DVIs, when we talk about setting expectations, I think it's very, very simple when you take it back to a very granular level and you say, what's number one? Well, you care about your customer. You do what's best for them. You put yourself in their shoes. So for us, the first part of the process is, Mrs. Customer, it's going to be X number of dollars to test your vehicle. Here's the estimate. Do you have any questions or concerns with the estimate? No, it looks good. Go ahead and proceed, right? So we pull the vehicle in, we perform the evaluation, and we tell our story. What do I mean by tell my story? I go over everything the technician has. I look at the pictures. I look at the videos. I document all that, and I begin to tell a story about the condition of the vehicle. I begin to talk about their concern. What is your concern? How does it affect the vehicle? What's causing it? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? I explain it in great detail so they understand exactly what they're up against. And then I explain the consequences of not correcting the concern. Not in a scary way, not in a mean way, just bluntly, if you don't correct this, this is what happens, right? And I go down the list, and every single thing the technician finds, that's exactly what I do. It's not to scare them. It's to make sure they understand what it can do, what it can cause, what are the effects of doing or not doing this now. What is this, right? So with brake fluid, we explain that it absorbs moisture and the concerns that it can cause within the brake system and what the manufacturers say about it. We're not just putting on there needs brake fluid exchange. No, we're explaining why it needs it. We're educating our customer as we go. We present the estimate to the customer. We say, Mrs. Customer, here's our recommendations. I've prioritized them from the top down. But we go through and we explain to the customer exactly what's going on with the vehicle. We educate the customer about the concerns that we're seeing with the vehicle. We give them every bit of the information that they need to make an informed decision, and then we put it in their hands. Now, I'm a little bit different. I'm not like everybody else where I'll call them and have a really high-pressure sales conversation. In our shop, what I do is I call and say, hey, Mrs. Customer, I just wanted to let you know, here's the things we've talked about, and I'm going to be sending this over to you here in just a few minutes. I want you to be able to make the decision on your own time. I don't want this to be a high-pressure event. I want you to be able to take time and look at this and make a decision that you feel good about. If it were me, here's what I would do, and that would cost X. And I send it to them, and they do what I recommend.
Yeah, we do a very similar thing. So one thing we didn't talk about, and this was mentioned in the post, and this is kind of what brought me to ask you, hey, we should have a podcast about this. And I know you guys were already thinking about it, so it's not like but so they were talking about, well, we told them it would be 2 hours of this or 3 hours of that or an hour. I'm like, people don't understand what that is. You have to tell them in dollars. So when you're estimating something, front brakes, it's going to cost, pads and rotors and sensors are going to cost X, Y, Z for the whole thing. Parts, labor, tax, everything has to be included in that price that you give them, right? Because they don't understand dollars. They don't understand labor hours. And if you break it down, the parts are this, the labor is this, the tax is this, the shop fees are this. You just spat off a bunch of numbers, and most people didn't capture any of it. You just give them a number, just one number. You say your brakes are going to cost this. Now, some people, they can package it up, right? So the safety issues are going to cost you $1,200. The maintenance issues are going to cost you another $700, and then the other items are going to cost you another $400. So whatever works for you, just focus on dollars, right? The presentation, read your customer. I think most people can gauge on how the customer is going to run it. We do a different presentation where, we have Techmetrics, so we'll text them the report, the technician's report. We'll go over the technician's report. We'll say, okay, now you see that little picture right there? Yeah, click on that. Okay, now you see where I circled the red? You see the crack in the rubber? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's why we need to replace this part. Okay, now let's move on to the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. We go over everything. And then when we're done, I'm going to, my service writer does it differently than I do, but the way I do it is I'll text them while I'm on the phone with them. I'll text them the estimate, and then I'll say, okay, so you remember that rubber thing we were talking about? Yeah, that's what this is. So I would recommend you approve that. Okay, that oil pan gasket that was just wet around the gasket, it's not urgent, decline that. The oil filter housing gasket that's leaking on the belt, yeah, we need to do that. That's important. The brake fluid change, it's at 4%. We need to do that. And then so they literally approve and decline while I'm on the phone with them. And then they hit the submit button. And then I go to refresh my screen and I'm like, yep. So it looks like you approved this, and this. The total is going to be X. I'll have the car ready for you tomorrow afternoon. Do you need another car to drive?
Exactly. Yep. And setting that expectation, right? I think this all comes back to setting proper expectations. How long is it going to take? When's the car going to be ready for pickup? What does it look like when it's done? What's the exact price I'm going to owe when I get to the shop? Right? Those are all absolutely key for a good customer relationship. And it's like shop owners are terribly afraid to say, Mrs. Customer, it's going to be $139.95 or $200 to test your car. They're afraid, right? But 99.99% of the time, it doesn't matter. The customer came to you because they want the car fixed. They came to you because they trust you. They came to you because they know you're ethical, right? If you soil that belief that you are honest and ethical by telling them after the fact you charged them to test it, by not giving them the written estimate up front, by not being transparent, boys, you've done yourself a disservice. Let me tell you.
I think that hesitancy is for shop owners is the expectation that they're going to fight you or they're going to question you on the price or whatever the dollar amount you want to give them up front. I had a mentor come in, and he was watching us, and this was years and years ago, but he was watching us interact with a customer, and the customer was giving me a list of things that she wanted me to check on the vehicle. And she's like, this light's not working, and I need to check the brakes, and I need an oil change, and I want this, that, and the other. And I said, okay, well, we'll get it looked at, and I'll give you a call. She left. And he turns around and he goes, you didn't discuss how much all this was going to cost. I said, well, we're just going to check it. and he's like, no. I guarantee you she did not walk in the door expecting you to do all these quote-unquote checks for free. I guarantee you she walked in the door expecting a charge for every single one of these items. So everything should have carried an item. Okay, we're going to check the brakes. It's X amount of dollars. We're going to do oil filter service. It's going to be X amount of dollars. We're going to do electrical testing on the turn signals. It's going to be this much. Your total right now is going to be X amount of dollars. If there's going to be any additional charges, I'll give you a call. Or if we end up finding out what it needs and we can do an estimate from there, I'll give you a call with that estimate. But because I didn't set that expectation, I didn't say that up front to them. And some of it was fear, some of it was in my mind. And I mentioned this earlier. In my mind, I thought, we'll have the car on the rack already, so it'll be really easy to inspect the brakes. It's going to be really easy for me to do a quick check on the turn signal. It's going to be really easy for me to do all these things. I wasn't assigning enough value to what I was bringing to the table. I wasn't assigning any value to what I was doing. All my years of knowledge and experience, throwing it out the door because of that fear that if I didn't see any value in it, and that's usually what it is, the shop owner doesn't see any value in it, and therefore that ends up coming across to the customer. And even if you do present a price, even if you do go, yeah, it's going to be, $278 to go through this, you're hesitant. You're hesitant to present that price because you yourself don't see any value in it. And that's why you see a lot of shop owners, once they hire a service advisor, their ARO goes up because the service advisor, especially if they're a professional, they understand the value that the technician's bringing. They understand the value in getting all these things checked. It's not free. It shouldn't be free. And therefore, they're okay selling it to the customer up front, being very forthright with the charges. I think that's key. So it ends up being a mindset shift for the service, for the shop owner, to get to the point where, everything we check, if we're touching it on the car, there is a charge assigned to it.
Yeah. And look, even if you don't do it right that minute, right, while they're there, because, for me, for instance, it can be hard to get an estimate to come together that quickly, right? Sometimes I need to sit down and think about what we're going to do. Mrs. Customer, we'll be in touch in just a little bit with an estimate to test each one of these things. We'll get your approval before we proceed, right?
Yeah, that's what I say to everybody that calls in. I tell my service advisors to tell them, we will not charge you a dime without your explicit approval.
Right.
That sets everybody at ease. The customer, because that's always, for us at least, in my experience, that ends up being the fight on the phone. Well, how much do you charge to do this? I got to look at the vehicle. Well, I need to know how much it's going to be before I bring it down there because I don't know if I have enough. I said, I'll tell you what, we can do this assessment for this price, and I won't charge you another dime without your explicit approval.
Right.
And that ends up easing their mind that, I know I'm going to walk in and spend whatever, $70, $80, $100, $150. Whatever that dollar amount is, that's all I've spent in my mind. And I know that I'm not going to get surprised. Because I think for a lot of customers, that ends up being the fear. I'm going to walk into that shop and walk out with, a $2,000 bill. I'm not going to be able to pay it. What am I going to do? I'm going to freak out and not be able to get my car back. And I'm not going to be able to pay the bill. I don't know what I'm going to do. I remember very, very vividly one of my very first experiences at a shop with I guess it was my second vehicle. I walk in there and I had them do something with the brakes. And I get up to the counter and I'm looking at the bill and I'm like, what's this $20 charge? And they're like, that's our inspection fee. And of course, I knew what was wrong with the car and I told them, right? And I'm like, no, I told you what was wrong with the car. Well, what are you charging me the fee for? And you did exactly what I told you needed to do, because that's what was obviously wrong with the vehicle. Why are you charging me the fee? And the guy's like, well, we have to charge that fee anytime we're doing anything on brakes. Now, they didn't tell me that up front. Man, did that sour me.
Right, yeah.
My immediate thought was, man, these shops are just screwing people over. $20 to do something, to check the system over, and they never called me and told me that they had inspected the brakes, and that they didn't communicate with me. If he had told me up front, bring it down, we'll be happy to take a look at your brakes. There's a $19.99, and the $20 was whatever, but at the time I was broke. I was 19 years old. I was broke. If the guy had just communicated with me and said it's going to be $19.99, we'll do a full inspection to make sure that the only thing it needs is what you're telling us. And if that's the case, then the charge is going to be X amount of dollars, or then we'll call you with a full estimate, with a proper estimate to so you'll know exactly what the charges are going to be. I probably would have been okay with it, but they didn't tell me. They sprung it on me at the counter when I came to pay.
Right. And that's shady, right? And that's exactly what we're talking about here. And look, you bring up a very, very touchy subject that I see in ASOG all the time. People are always asking, well, how much do you charge to check brakes? Like, what are you talking about? I charge an hour to check brakes. What? How can I do that? Listen, you're dealing with the single largest safety system on the vehicle. If something fails with that brake system, you're talking about some major problems, right? Especially if you're riding down the road at 70 miles an hour. Yeah. And so we're giving this away, right? We're saying, oh, yeah, not a big deal. Hey, we'll just check it out. Listen, when I talk to my customers, and through changing my process, I've learned more and more about what customers are experiencing elsewhere. So when I'm talking to a customer and I say, hey, Mrs. Smith, it's going to be around $140 to do a complete brake system evaluation. She'll say, you're going to charge me to check my brakes? Yes, ma'am, but I'm not just going to look at the wheels and look at your pads and tell you that the pads are thick or thin. That's not an adequate inspection of your brake system. You see, Mrs. Smith, this is the single largest safety system on your vehicle. And if it's my job to keep your vehicle safe and reliable, I have to do a more thorough inspection. Mrs. Smith, I'm going to measure the rotors. I'm going to check the runout to ensure that the runout is correct so we don't have a pulsation down the road. I'm going to verify that the rotors can be reused. I'm going to measure the inside and the outside pad. That gives us an indication if the brake calipers could be sticking or dragging. Maybe they're hanging a little bit. We're also going to compress the calipers. We're going to inspect the brake hoses, the brake lines. We're going to inspect each part of the brake system for you. This helps us understand exactly what we need to do to provide an adequate estimate. Mrs. Customer, I'm sure you've been to a shop where they said, yep, you need brake pads. And then they call back and they say, well, and you need rotors too. And then they call back and they say, well, man, those calipers, gosh, those things sure are tight. We can't get them to compress. And oh, by the way, the one on the back, the bleeder broke off. I'd rather tell you that up front. And I think it builds a better relationship for you and I in the future. And guess what she says? Gosh, I wish I'd been coming here all along. Right? We put this thing that it's about price, it's about money. No, it's not about money. We've got to stop thinking this is about money. This is about value. This is about getting into a situation where instead of saying, hey, listen, gosh, Mrs. Smith, I hate to tell you, but gosh, I'm going to have to charge you $140 to look at your brakes. Mrs. Smith, I know what's best for you, and it's best if we do a complete brake system evaluation. Here's the expectation that you can have for that evaluation. Now, why does it work? It's because they have had bad experiences in the past. We have to show them we're not the same.
No, that's great. And, that's a fantastic approach. And when you're going into that much detail, I think a good question would be for some folks who are listening in is how do you get to that point where you're that confident in your explanation of the process? And so I'll ask you that question. How did you get to that point? Was it just practice? Did you look in a mirror and test it out? Were you role playing with your service writers? Like what was something that got you over the hump? And got you more comfortable in explaining that process?
He popped out of the womb talking like that.
Well, here's the deal. Is that for me, it comes back to one simple thing, and you'll hear me say it over and over again. I'm that confident because I know I'm doing what's best for my customer. And I'll say it again. I am that confident because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am doing what is best for my customer. I'm not questioning myself. I'm not questioning my technicians. I know that everyone here is serving the best interest of that customer. I know the reason we charge that is because it is what is best for that customer. So step number one is confidence in yourself and your process, because you got to know what's best for them. The customer doesn't always know what's best. It's our job to educate them. It's our job to guide them. You don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to be sour about it. You have to educate them and guide them. And when I know I'm doing what's best, it's as simple as understanding what that process needs to look like, right? And how do I get confident with the process? Well, I know what we're doing, right? We sat down and we said, how do we ensure, right? So maybe we had a rotor pulsation come back. Okay. How do we ensure that doesn't happen again? Well, we can check run out. We can ensure that we measure the rotors, right? It all goes back to the process. We build a process like that to solve certain problems. And when we built the process as a team, we all know that each one of those things serves a specific purpose. And all I'm doing is explaining it to my customer so she understands this is the level we're willing to go to for you to make sure your vehicle is safe and reliable, to make sure that you have confidence when you put your child in that vehicle, you don't have to worry about it.
Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street guy, he says that selling is a transference of certainty. When you approach the sale with absolute certainty, that emanates from you to the prospect, and they're more likely to buy. When you're absolutely certain about what it is that you're selling. And that's after the questions and making sure that it's a right fit. This is assuming that what you have to offer is the exact right thing for that person. But once you've made that determination, when you approach it with that absolute certainty, when you approach it with the confidence that Lucas does, it becomes an easy sell. It's not a fight. There's no hesitancy in what he says. He knows that this is exactly what that customer needs, and this is what's best for them. And when you approach it with that confidence, there's no question. They're more likely to buy.
Well, and look, here's the thing, is this all comes back to one very, very important factor. The customer cannot dictate the policy or the process of the repair shop. It's true.
Well, hold on now. This is assuming that the shop has a policy or a process to it. You just outlined it yourself, that a lot of your processes in just doing a brake inspection came from issues that were arising in the past. The vehicle goes out, turns out it had warped rotors, or it turns out that you have to call the customer back because you didn't check the caliper properly to make sure that it wasn't locked up, or that you didn't look at the bleeders or the brake lines and they started leaking after the fact when you started doing the service, and that requires a callback. You're going to be much more thorough when you tell the customer that, hey, or you tell your technicians, hey, we're charging $150 to do this brake inspection. I cannot come back to the customer and say we missed something.
Right. But here's my point though, right? Is that oftentimes we will begin to put these processes and policies in place, and then we will let the customer come in and walk all over them. I don't want to do that. That's great, but that's how we do it here. But I don't want to. I completely understand. This is our process. This is how we do it. Well, I'm not paying $130 or $140 to get my brakes evaluated. That's great. You're going to get your brakes checked somewhere else because we are not. This is the process. Well, but that's not fair. I understand you feel that way, but this is what we have to do to ensure you get the quality of product that we desire. We are about providing an extremely high quality product. And to do that, we have to have certain policies and processes in place that ensure that we're able to provide that. And that goes back to from the very beginning, the estimate comes back to how we speak to the customer, how we get the approval, how we do the evaluation, right? And look, I say this, right? And I was talking to Seth the other day and talking to some other people, and we're talking about processes and policies. Look, I don't want to convey that I've got like pages and pages and pages of policies and processes and everything written out. No, we've just done it over and over again, and we've talked about, okay, that didn't work, we're going to do this. Many of these processes and policies probably should be documented, but the entire team is on the same page. This is how we do it. And it's something that I just do over and over and over again. Even if you don't write out a process or a policy, as long as you will build that policy mentally, if you're on the front counter and you follow your process and policy and not let anybody push you away from it, you're in good shape. You know, I had a technician who would not do a DVI. He would not do it. He refused. And for years, I accepted subpar performance for my customers, right? And I think I need to make sure I say that, because a lot of shop owners need to hear that. When a technician's not doing his job, it's not the job for you that he's not doing well. It's the job and the safety and the reliability of the vehicle for your customer he's not doing well, right? That's where your reputation gets tanked and trashed. And this guy just would not do a DVI. Now, there's no way in hell I would accept from one of my guys anything less than a very good DVI. I'm not going to accept it. It's going to get sent back. And before, I was afraid to do that. Well, it's the same thing. When we set these processes and we have a policy that we're going to follow every single time, we just make up our mind. This is how it's going to work. We're going to do this every single time. And nothing is going to change that. Come hell or high water, this is how we do it. But you got to make up your mind you're going to do that.
Absolutely.
So how do you approach things like brake inspections? I've got an oil leak, maybe less skill-intensive inspections or assessments at your shop, Stéphane?
So we don't go as thorough on the inspection as Lucas does on the brakes. So we'll do, if a customer's coming in for nothing else, then we'll charge them a half-hour labor for a multi-point inspection. If they're coming for an oil change, then the multi-point inspection is part of the oil change. But I'm also not charging $15 for an oil change, right? So the price I'm charging, I think the value, they should get an inspection as part of that price. So once we do the inspection, we don't disassemble. We'll take the left front wheel off, and we'll take the right rear wheel off, because that's where the sensors are at on a BMW, and that's what we inspect. If we're just going to do part of a multi-point inspection on the brakes, and then we'll be able to measure the inner and outer pad on the left front and the right rear, and we'll get millimeters as to how much thickness, because we use the BMW tool to measure the thickness of the pad. We'll put a micrometer on the rotor. We'll measure the thickness of the rotor. And if they're at or below spec, we'll recommend. If they're 4 millimeters or below, we'll recommend the pads. And if the rotors are within a half millimeter of spec, even if they're half millimeter above spec, we'll recommend the rotors. We don't turn rotors if it's just pads. We've not run into any issues with cars coming back with any vibrations. If there's spots on the rotors or if there's grooves in them, then yeah, we'll recommend them. But for the most part, we've never really run into any issues with that for brake inspections, and we definitely don't take the rotors off. Especially on the rear is the only time where it can bite you, because some of those have the parking brake shoe on the hub on the inside of the rear brake rotors. But for the most part, I'm not going to create, for us, we're not going to create a policy for something that would happen 1 out of 100 times. Will it bite me in the ass that 1 out of 100 times? Yeah, probably. But I don't know that I need to go into that much detail for the brakes, just because maybe if I was in the Rust Belt, or maybe if I was in an area or maybe if I dealt with different cars that would more often bite me in the behind, I probably would change that policy. But you know what they say is policies are written in blood. I mean, if something happens to you and it really hurts you and it does it a lot, then yeah, you need to change your policy and make it a mandate so that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what to expect.
I do it almost the exact same way.
So it's, I mean, his way is very thorough. And I definitely think there's value in it, but for him to go through that, there must be a reason. He must have had a lot of issues where he had to call the customer back and update update the estimate. I mean, maybe it's just my area, but bleeders. Shoot, I don't even know the last time we had a bleeder break. It was over a year ago, and it's usually not that big a deal. But it's not very often on the cars that we work on.
We see probably 2 to 3 vehicles a week with busted brake lines. So we've got a lot of salt in our area, and we see a lot of corrosion in our area. And the thing is that we've got a lot of shops who will change brake pads for 5-6 years in a row. Many times we get a vehicle in that we'll see a half-inch lip on the edge of the rotor on both sides where it's worn down into it. And the other shops around have not said anything. Hey, you need rotors, right? It is our shop policy. Typically, we change rotors when we do pads. Mrs. Customer, I'm going to give you a 36-month, 36,000-mile nationwide warranty on this. It does not matter if they wear out. And listen, up here, if you're tough on the brake pedal, you're going to wear them out because, I mean, we've got some very, very steep grades where we're at, right? And so having a warranty alone on a set of brake pads is pretty impressive. But we do it because we recognize there are certain challenges a braking system in our area faces that we must counter with a thorough evaluation. And if we're not countering it with a thorough evaluation, it will sneak up on you and bite you. The other thing is that, either one of you, if a customer busts a brake line or a car won't stop, you probably run into another car, a guardrail, you coast to a stop. There are places here where you don't stop until you reach 2 counties over. We've got 1,000, 1,500 foot drops in some places here. So if you lose brakes in some of these areas, it is not going to be a fun time.
Well, that is absolutely, that's, again, it's hard for, I'll just say this. You can't have, not all shops will do it the same way, right? Like you're in a market where you have to do that. And frankly, I think that most clients should expect that because they live in an area where there's going to be rust. They didn't unless they just moved there and they've been living there for 6 months or a year and they're like, holy cow, but if they grew up around there, they grew up around there. This is not news to them. So that's come to their expectation.
Well, the problem is the shops that aren't doing that. The problem is that, like you said, he has shops that are they're throwing pads on the car. I get that all the time. There's 1,000 shops around me that will just throw pads on the vehicle. And I tell them that's not a proper brake service. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I need pads, rotors, hardware. I need to clean and lubricate everything. I need to put the braking conditioner on the rotor. Like I do a whole dog and pony show with a brake service. And it's not the same thing as slapping pads on. I don't pad slap here. But the problem is the other shop's not doing it. And so they finally show up to Lucas's shop and they're getting blindsided, essentially. They've never heard of this. What are you talking about? The last 3 shops I went to just slap pads on there. They're down the street from you.
And that's when you ask the question, so if you like the service you went there, then why are you here?
I don't think I could ask that without sounding snarky as hell.
You have to. You can do it.
You just said it smoothly. You just said it very smoothly, and it didn't sound very condescending. I would say it, and it would come off condescending or snarky. I don't know.
No,
well, just practice it.
Yeah.
No. What you do is you throw the Rick White at them. Mrs. Customer, is it the cost or the price that concerns you? And watch their head explode. You know,
it works when you have a Southern accent and you say it like this, and you know, I can't do that. They'll hear the annoyance. I'm annoyed at this point if I have to over-explain things. And listen, either you want me to do it, either you want me to do it properly, or you don't. And if you don't, there's a door.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's, when the customer calls me up and they say, I went to this other shop and they gave me an estimate and how much is it to do this? I'm like, well, what was there a reason why you didn't have them do the work? Like, right. Well, I think their price is high. Okay, where did you go? And if they'll say the dealership, I'm like, okay, well, I might have a fighting chance. You know, but if it's if they say, well, I went to Joe Schmo's shop, and I'm like, well, I mean, what makes you think would be less expensive? No, seriously, I asked that question. I'm like, why do you think, what makes you think would be less expensive? Well, I just thought their price was high. Okay, well, at this point, it sounds like there's a trust issue. And I don't have a problem asking that question. I said, look, I honestly feel there's a trust issue. I think there's more than just the price. I think there's a reason why you didn't have them do the work. Why don't we do this? Why don't we set you up with an appointment? Let us take a look at the car, and at least you can compare second opinions. We'll take pictures of everything that we have, and that way you can see exactly what we're seeing, and then you can make the best decision, because after all, it is your car. We don't know your financial situation. You need to make a decision but you need to make an informed decision. And then a lot of times, a lot of folks are like, I like that approach. Or they'll say, I just want a price. You can't win them all.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the ASOG podcast. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. It helps spread the word. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you have any topic suggestions, please reach out to me via email. My email address is david@asog.site. That's david@asog.site. Until next time.